Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'm an alcoholic. My name's Jim Finn. You know, the darndest thing happened to me. I left the playtime, and I only had 75 cents when I went in there. And I put a quarter of that on the pool table, so I only had 2 beers, and I lost both games, and I left. And got a 502. Damn this. And you know what they did? They made me go to the Alcoholism Council. And I went down there, and there was an old, he's older than me, black guy sitting there. He said, Mr. Finn, we can send you to driving school. He said, now that's Tuesday and Thursday, and starts at 6 and ends at 10, and it's going to cost you some money. He says, or we can send you to AA. He says, there's one right by your house, and it don't cost anything. You can go when you want to. And I said, give me that one. If he'd have told me that driving school was as easy as he told me AA was, I'd probably be in Folsom right now with the driving certificate on my wall. So you can see I came to you with a burning desire for an easier, softer way. When Dave told me they were going to tape this stuff I was going to talk about, you know, and they were going to send a copy to my friend in Oregon, and I figured I'd mention him. 5 years ago in May, I was up in a crane, and it malfunctioned or I malfunctioned, and I fell off the crane and landed on my head, and ended up in Cedars-Sinai, and I was unconscious in pretty bad shape. And somehow Dave and Bob heard about what had happened, and they come down to Cedars-Sinai right away, and they said, told Bob, you can't go in there. And he said, what do you mean? I'm Dr. Cleveland. And walked on in there. And I have recovered a little bit from that brain damage. I tell you what I did. I got 4 ties, neckties, and they're all different widths. And I was studying tonight on, I wonder what width is in style this season. And I picked this one, and I figured, well, when I get down there, being in Playa del Rey and all, I'll look over at the people that know tie widths. And if I'm wrong, I'll know better next time. I don't see a sucker here with a tie on. I got to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 41 years old, and I forget who was talking. I think it was Larry when he took his cake that was talking about them people those places, blaming. And I had no idea, none whatsoever, that there was anything the matter with me. It, like I hear people mention considering suicide. Never, ever have I thought about that. Homicide often. If I could just get rid of those people that were doing these things to me, then it would be okay. And I had to be around here for a while to even get an inkling that I was the problem. But I don't guess normal people. Like I've done a lot of time in penitentiaries. Let me start out and tell you where I come from. My mama run away from my daddy and went to Hot Springs, Arkansas. And I was born somewhere in transit. And somehow I ended up in a home for unwed mothers. And Mr. and Mrs. Jeffries, this is back in about 33, 34, Mr. and Mrs. Jeffries needed a playmate for Elmer. and they went down to that home for unwed mothers, and at that time, to get a baby, you didn't have to show the social worker income and how many bedrooms you got and employment. I guess you just went down there and said, give me that one. And they went down there and they said, give me that one, and I was that one. And they named me Cecil Jack Jeffries. They could do that. And do you know, I was talking to a guy I was riding with today, a newcomer, and he was saying, my mother and father died of alcoholism. He says, I think I caught it. And I was telling him, I don't know that it matters how we got it. Not important at all. I had to at one time ask myself, and I was around here for 5 years and had not drank or used a drug. And after 5 years, I had to ask myself a question. Is there really a disease called alcoholism? Or is that 20 questions a shim to get us to join something? Is there a disease? But I had the benefit of having been able to be around you people for a length of time and see and hear your experience, where I was able to come up with, yeah, there's a disease called that. And then I had to ask myself, have I got it? Yeah, I got it. And like when I was 36, I had done 13 years in penitentiaries. And normal people don't do that, And I wasn't able to reflect back on that until I had been here for a little while. I grew up down there in Arkansas on a farm, and I grew up pissed off about being named Cecil. You laugh, but you ain't ever been named Cecil. I wanted to be named Rocky. Yeah. And what I was telling that newcomer today, is I was a strange young human being. I mean, very strange. Long before I was ever able to get a hold of any alcohol or drugs. I was a liar and a cheat and a thief. I'd lie to you if the truth would sound better. And I'd steal from you if I didn't need it. There was something the matter. But I don't guess I was an alcoholic until I drank alcohol. But I was sure one sick puppy, I'll tell you. And I was glad when you read chapter 3 here that you went into that little extra part about switching from wine to brandy or brandy to wine. I did a couple of those things. One time, I joined the Sons of Italy. And I thought that would help me. I really did. And one time, I got to feeling poorly, and I figured I'm drinking too much beer. And I switched to a gentleman's drink, cream de mint on the rocks. Nothing changed except I had a green tongue. So when I get to hear that extra part of chapter 3, you know, I think about some of the things that I searched for to make my life better. Never occurred to me that maybe if I quit drinking, well, I couldn't have quit anyhow, and knew I couldn't. You know when I was able to quit? When I was able to quit, that's when. Yeah, it happens when it happens, man. I got some guys living at my house that are taking it to the gates of insanity and death. And man, I want to do something to help them. And then in the big book, it tells me no human power. I can't do nothing. But the big book also tells me who can. God couldn't would if he was son. I'd be damned. That's back when I first came, and I ain't done with Cecil Jack yet, but I wander once in a while. When I first was around here a while, I hear an old timer say, all the answers are in the big book. And I'd snicker and maybe not say it, but I'd sure think it. You don't even know what the question is, sucker. How do you know the answers are there? And I can stand here today and tell you that I believe that all the answers are in the big book. Believe it with all my heart. The World War II broke out. Has anybody here seen the Beverly Hillbillies where the whole family's in that pickup truck with grandma? We came to California like that. From Hot Springs, Arkansas. Yeah, Cecil, I don't think we had a rooster though. And Cecil Jack, Elmer, and Lydia, and Elmer Sr. And we came out here, you know, and moved to Richmond, and they were going to work in the shipyards. And I didn't last long. You know, I was so happy to get out here because I'd just been in the country up until I was 12 years old, and that's about all I knew. And all of a sudden, I was a city slicker in Richmond, California. And I used to tell people that I rolled queers for a living, and that wasn't true. What I used to do is find these youngsters in the Navy. Back in World War II, the sailors didn't have pockets in their pants, and they hung their billfold in their belt. And you'd catch them passed out all over because they come in from leave, you know, and if you just snatch and run, you could make a fairly decent living around sailors. And that didn't even last long. I got arrested real shortly after we got to Richmond for stealing sugar wafers out of a grocery store. And they had just started doing something called diagnostic on people. And they took me and diagnosed me. And I figured, well, now, all the hip slick guys went to Tracy, which is a reformatory then. They diagnosed me and sent me to the Napa State Institution for the Mentally Insane. Can you imagine that? And I got up there, and they had that thing in wards. They had a ward over here, you know, and them people looked kind of like you people, kind of normal. And then they had a ward over there, and them people you could tell were a little dingy. And then they had a ward over there where them people were nuttier than a fruitcake, man. They'd crap in their hand and throw it at each other. They were nuts. Do you know they put Cecil Jack over there with them? They did. And the war got over, and I went back to Arkansas, and Mr. and Mrs. Jeffries packed me up one day and took me back to that home for unwed mothers. And Mrs. Smith, who they'd got me from, was still there after all these years. And they said, Mrs. Smith, we've raised this boy, we love him, but there's something the matter with him. And we're bringing him back to you. And it just happened that Mrs. Smith knew who my mother was, who my grandmother was, and she knew where my grandmother was. And she says, how would you like to go to Wisconsin? And I just wanted to go someplace, you know. Any place where I could go would be better than where I was, and that's how all my life was before I got to AA. And I said, you betcha. And she gave me $2, bus ticket to La Crosse, Wisconsin, and a pack of Philip Morris. I was 13. Yeah. Back in Arkansas, I was allowed to carry my own tobacco at 6. I'm 60 now, so I've been smoking for 54 years. And so that wasn't unusual. And I got up there and met my grandma and found out that my name was James Edward Finn, that I was a Roman Catholic. I had been a Baptist up until then, you know. And they enrolled me in parochial school, 8th grade, St. Mary's Basilica. And I you know, you hear stuff. And I heard in catechism, I heard it, probably the first sentence I heard about the Catholic Church, that if you play with yourself, you're going to hell. And the church never stood a chance with me. I never even considered the Catholic Church when I heard that. And you know what? I hadn't been a Catholic but 2 or 3 months, man. It was Christmas Eve night, and all good Catholics went to midnight mass. And we went down there to St. Olaf's in Minneapolis, me and my new stepmother. And it was a city parish with no school, so they didn't have built-in altar boys. And old Father Murphy came out. And none of the parishioners got up to assist him. And my stepmother said, get up there, get up there. And I didn't even know why they were talking in Latin. And I went up there, and I knew I was going to make a mess of it. It turns out where Father Murphy was 76, and he was a little senile. And he hadn't remembered any Latin for years. But he faked it. He'd say, and I said, and we knocked out a mass in about 8 minutes there. And after the mass, he says, how would you like to be my regular altar boy? And I said, you bet. So I started doing that. And the damnedest thing happened. I learned at Cumsbury 220, I learned the responses. I learned how to do it. And I guess I was a fairly decent altar boy. But nothing had changed in me. I was still the liar, cheat, and thief. And I can't remember if I'd had any alcohol or drugs yet. And I got to be a good altar boy. I took this car away from the guy. And what was it? Probably about 15 now, 16, with my own automobile. And then I got to thinking, in Minneapolis, if you got a hot car, you got to do something to fool the police. And I gave it some real good, serious thought. And I went down and dyed my hair red and drove my car. And I got arrested. See, now here in California, Ralph could dye his hair red. Nobody say a word, you know. Back in 1949 in Minnesota, I went to Red Wing Training School for Boys. And it was a terrible place. And it was a double terrible place if you went up there a redhead and the roots started coming up. Your peer pressure was tough on you, you know. And I went into the Army from there, and I damn near got out of basic training. I got in the Army, and somewhere in there I had developed a taste for beer. God, I love beer. And I couldn't afford beer. They only paid you $72 a month as a recruit in 1949 in the U.S. Army. And I don't remember how much beer was in 1949, but it was more than $72 would buy. And me and one of my cadremen, he had the same problem. He made $78 and it wasn't enough for him. So me and him figured if we robbed Kansas, that we'd have enough to drink beer. And we tried that. And on at the end of basic, they gave us a test. And they had formulated this test where you'd have to be pretty dumb not to pass it because they wanted to get you on to your next station, you know. Like, which is your right shoulder arms? And which end of the gun is the barrel on? And difficult stuff. And I had been out getting beer money the night before, and I fell asleep on my test paper. Out of 600 guys in the whole company, and there were some dummies in there, man. I mean, real dumb-dumbs. I was the only one that failed that sucker, as smart as I was, you know. But I knew I loved the Army, man. I was gonna be a general one day. Just knew I was, and I knew that the people that were training me knew that too. But when I failed that test, I had to go before some officers, and this one officer says, "Recruit Finn, we can send you to your next station. We can discharge you, or we can run you through another cycle of basic." And the representative they sent with me was the platoon sergeant. And he held up his hand, and the officer said, "Yes, Sergeant." He says, "If you run him through basic again, I don't want the son of a bitch in my outfit." And I thought that he knew what my aspirations were, you know. And this happened to me all my life, man. Reality just completely escaped me. And it didn't matter because I went to the penitentiary a few months later trying to get a little more beer money. Went up there, I was in Kansas, Fort Riley, Kansas, and me and my partner I was on my way to Minnesota and he was on his way to Missouri and we got caught burglarizing. And I got a 5 to 10 in the Kansas penitentiary. Most people, again, the dummies, the dum-dums, was going up there with 5 to 10 and going home in 39 months. Just kind of automatic. Took me 8 years and 7 months to do it. Just couldn't get the hang of it. Later, I ended up in the Texas penitentiary with a 4-year sentence. Most guys going home in 10 months. Finn took him 44 months to do it. It just couldn't get the hang of it, man. And reality escaped me. I've been married 5 times. I tell you what, I've either been married or in jail most of my life. Until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. I got here, and at my first meeting, it was a little group of about 12 people, and we sat in a circle. And you knew when your turn was because when the guy on this side or the lady on this side had her turn or his, you're next. You know, Ralph was there, not this Ralph, Norwegian Ralph. And he did this for a long time. He says, "I don't read the big book. said, I go to a meeting every night. And I don't drink in between. He's been doing it for a year, and he says, my life's pretty good, and he'd sit down. And all through the years now, I've not known him to change his story an awful lot. And I figured when he said that, if somebody went to one of these things every night, he must not have any place to go. Who'd even consider it? Certainly not me, as slick as I am. One guy there, he says, if you want what we got, and he was sitting with a lady that looked like an orangutan. All this came together for me, man. I said, well, I sure don't want none of that. He says, you go to any lengths to get it. Little Jack asked me, he said, would you give me a ride to a meeting? And I said, yeah. And see, the kind of guy I was at my first meeting, I bought me a big book and a 12 and 12 and a 24-hour book, and it got every pamphlet they had there and kind of held them up where you could see that I had them. Never opened them. Little Jack said, would you drive me to a meeting? And I said, yeah. And a couple of days later he called and he said, could you give me a ride to a meeting? I said, yeah. He said, well, we want to start a little early. I said, how come, Jack? He said, well, it's in Bakersfield. And the very next night, it was in Laguna Beach. And you know, we did it for a year. And if you think every night was something outrageous to me, on Saturday, we went to a 9 o'clock breakfast meeting, a noon meeting at Angelino in Burbank, a 2:30 men's stag, and at 8:30 we went to this meeting back at Angelino, and I said, wow. He said, not yet, buddy, we got a midnight candlelight meeting. And that's what this guy did on weekends. And I drove him. And I wouldn't consider going to a meeting every day. But I didn't mind driving Jack. And you know, about 5 years ago, I was down in South Bay someplace, and the speaker was talking about his early experience in AA, and he told that story. He told about this little gimp-legged guy that got a hold of him, said his name was Jack, and did the same thing to him. Had him at a meeting every night and cut him loose after. He took him to H&I and got him a panel and cut him loose. And that's what Jack did for me. And he took me, I got a year sober, and he took me down to Royal Palms Hotel. No Royal Palms, do you? And in the ballroom, I bet you there was 300-400 people there. And he says, these are H&I people. And he turned the panel over to me in the old county jail. And I got active in that H. See, that's how I was able to stay here for 5 years without really having anything to offer. I was able to stay here on bullshit, on sociability. And if it have ever approached me with a vision for you where it says that you can't give something away you ain't got, that may have pulled up my tracks, but I'll tell you, I got involved in H&I. I had panels. I got so involved of it, they made me the chairman of Los Angeles Institutional Committee. And I hadn't worked a step. Hadn't even considered working. Hadn't had need to. I was doing fine, you know. I answered phones at the central office. Hell, I was a GR, General Service, GSR, General Service Representative of a group for 6 months. And one day somebody says, what do you guys do, you GSRs? I said, I don't know. But I am one. See, that's my experience. I got to be chairman of that thing. Then I got to be coordinator of Southern Cal H&I Intergroup. And then when my office was up, the guy died that took my place, and I got to be it for another year. And ain't got a thing in the world to give away. And I just hope to God today that I never heard anybody passing on this wonderful message that I didn't know nothing about. I didn't know no steps. I'd been around here 5 years, and my life was not good. I was not a happy camper. And I was wondering what to do. What to do. I said, I know, I'll get a sponsor. So I started looking for somebody as smart as me. And when you're as smart as me, it's hard to find anybody as smart as you. And I gave up on that, and I was back to what to do. And this guy at San Fernando Group, his name was Kenny, and he had 30-some years. And whenever he'd walk by, the newcomers would say, "Big Book Nazi." That's what they called him. And I figured, well, he's worthy of me. And I went up to him and I said, "Kenny, how would you like to be my sponsor?" You know what he said? He said, "Well, I don't know." He says, "Can we talk about it?" And I went over to his house. We had a little coffee and sat down. He says, "Jim, have you done step one?" I said, "You got to be shitting me, man. This is Finn you're talking to. GSR." Central office. He says, "Have you done step one?" I said, "What is it?" One of our cake takers was saying he worked the 12 steps first day. He read them. You know, hell, I went further than that. I worked the 12 traditions in the first day, too. See? And we sat down there that morning, and I was able to be pretty comfortable with step one. What I got today in my pocket on step one, and it came to me as kind of a spiritual thing. I don't know, I just felt warm, and I felt it in my heart, man, that I had step one. And this was sometime later after my sit down with Kenny. And what I got today is, Finn, you can't get loaded no matter what. That's step one for me. No matter how bad, shit, bad don't bother me. Things have been bad for me all my life, man, before I got here. I'm used to bad. But you know the one that would be dangerous to me, and what somebody from my home group last month was there in Las Vegas and won $1.9 million. I don't even know how much that is. It's more than $8. Oh, that would be dangerous to me. Don't let me hit the lotto. I better get my fat butt right to a meeting. If something like that happened, you know, because I just know the committee'd say, "Finn, you ain't ever had no money. You ought to live in Malibu and have cocktails on the weekend." That's the kind of stuff my committee tell me on a big money thing. And fortunately, I've learned from you people what to do about it. I hope that I have. Probably won't ever have to come to the proof of it. So I got step one, and then what we were trying to accomplish that day was 1, 2, and 3. And we discussed 2 and 3, and I told him I was okay with it. And then you know what he had me do? Had me get down on my knees and say the 3rd step prayer with him. And I did that. And there was a problem there, though. I would not be capable of even considering doing steps 2 and 3 without a higher power. See? I don't think you can do it. But we went away grinning at each other, you know, Finn with 1, 2, and 3 under his belt, but it wasn't really true. And a couple years later, there was a fellow from San Diego, and they call him Father Bill. And Father Bill is one of these genius guys that the church recognized how smart he was, and they pulled him out of, when he got to be a priest, they took him to Rome and taught him secret stuff, man. I mean, they taught him what was really happening in the Roman Catholic Church. And then he got stationed up here in San Diego and ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he told us that he had found God in chapter 4 of the big book, page 55. It says, well, not on 55, it says God either is or he isn't. God's everything or he's nothing. And it said the great reality can be found deep down inside of you. And when this guy, that his business was God, a doctor in theology, had to come to us to find God, I figured, now that's something for a guy as smart as me. And that's where I found my higher power. And when I found it, I was able to put 2 and 3 together. And also the morning I left that sponsor, he gave me a written set of instructions about doing a 4th step, and I followed the instructions. And life is, I got to tell you, I haven't been to jail since November. Yeah. It's harder for, I tell you what, we got a guy named Bob that started a men's stag over in Sherman Oaks, and he talks about not being the same person sober that was before we got here. And I've heard this coming out of him for many years. And my friend up in Oregon hung a name on him, called him One Note Bob. He said all the sucker talks about is not being the same person now as you were when you got here. And I couldn't hear it until I could hear it. And one day I was able to hear it. And my God, I have been, what time am I supposed to quit? 9 o'clock? Huh? Birdie. Midnight. Come on, don't give me that business. About 9? I'm about done. Last November, I was in a parking lot and opened my truck door, you know, and it just touched this guy's new Cadillac. And he got out of there, and he ain't got a big belly, but he about that tall, but his chest hit about where my belly does. And he ran out there and said, "You hit my car." And I was standing there and I was ready for him. I got program, I got God, I got experience. And I said, "You know, sir, I'm aware of that. And I certainly apologize." And he said, "You hit my car." I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "You hit my car." And I went back to the old person before he got here. I kicked him in a soft spot, you know. And I hit him a couple times. And I drug him around the lot a little bit. And I went to jail. And then when it come around getting it squared away, you know, I went down to the arraignment thing. And this lady told me, she said, "Well, they're offering you 30 days Caltrans." And I said, "Ma'am, I don't offering me, I ain't done nothing. This guy assaulted me." And she said, "Well, then plead not guilty if that's how you feel about it." And I did. And it turned out where I got found not guilty. And just before I got, the judge was telling the jurors, saying exactly what assault and battery was. And when they said it in plain English, I was listening to it. I said, "I did that. I assaulted and battered the sucker." And yet, I didn't say anything. And they went back and deliberated and found me not guilty. Now, here I'm sitting in a little mental, I'm just tickled to death. I ain't got to be working out there on the freeway, see. And yet, I got to practice these principles in all my affairs. And I don't know when I'm going to straighten this out. I was thinking about going over and talking to the guy, and he probably assault me, you know. I don't know what to do about that yet, but it's something I need to clear up. Half measures is going to avail me nothing, man. I can't stand here and tell you I'm a sober alcoholic if I'm out there doing crap, if I'm not trying to walk like I talk. You know, God, I've learned so much stuff here, man. I'll tell you a big thing I learned. If you're going to get to speak for this long, you learn to go potty before you come up here. Before I got here, I didn't know that, man. 20 minutes ago, I just said, excuse me, folks. I think I'm done. Thanks for letting me share with you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.